Thank you for the excellent introduction. Guten Morgen allen. Ich spreche ein klein bisschen Deutsch, verstehe alles, aber meine Sprache ist nicht so schnell, also wir machen das auf Englisch. Ist das gut? Danke. Danke.
What did you just say?
No, you go in German. Hmm? Oh, no. All right. So, my name's Olav Maassen. I work for Version 1. I'm the general manager for the EMEA region. We help companies such as yours deliver software, envision and deliver great software, enabling you to get a faster time to market and getting you the insights that you need and get the end-to-end visibility. Now, that's not why I'm here. That's not why we're here. As mentioned, Chris and I authored the book, Commitment, that deals with options. So you're a slightly intimidating crowd, because you might know some things that we don't know about options, or at least I don't know about options. I'd like to introduce Chris Matz.
Hi there, I'm Chris Matz. I'm an Agile coach, so I help organizations deliver software faster. That's my kind of day job. Of my career, 20 years of that career was spent in investment banks, building trading and risk management systems for many of the kind of household name banks. I did a master's degree in 1997-98 on option pricing, kind of derivatives pricing and risk management. So just a little test, because normally when I kind of mention things like derivatives and options, people go very blank. They don't know what it is. So how many of you have heard of options? Just quick. Yeah. How many of you have heard of Black-Scholes? You know what? We have never been in an audience where someone has heard of Black-Scholes before.
Absolutely.
So this is really exciting for me.
Really exciting. So cool. So what we'll do is take some of that theory that you know very well and place it in a different context. It's what we've done over the last couple of years, some things that we found out that you can apply options to real life and how to do that. We did call it real options, which causes some confusion because there's another model out there that's real options as well. So this is just option theory applied to real life.
Cool.
So before we start our presentation, we'd actually like to start with a magic trick. If you know the trick, don't share it with your people next to you. No worries, we will actually explain the magic trick and how it works. So for that, I need my lovely assistant, Chris. So we've got 3 envelopes. 1, 2, and 3. So what we'll now do is find a volunteer out of the audience. So in order to make sure I actually have no control over who that is, we'll actually introduce a random component. So otherwise I could just make arrangements and that would not make it a magic trick. So I will throw this over my shoulder. Whoever catches it then throws it over his shoulder again, and whoever catches it then will be my volunteer. Don't worry about it. You can just sit where you are. You don't have to come up to stage, but we'll ask you for your participation. So everybody ready for that part? Okay. Here we go. Oh.
I think it was a bigger room when you last did this. So just randomly throw it somewhere. Yeah, there we go. Right. Oh. So we have a volunteer.
All right. So I need my remote. Okay. So have we thrown it over our shoulder again?
We've got a volunteer.
Yes. Okay. So excellent. So now you have a choice. I'm going to ask you. So we've not spoken before today, right? No. Okay.
Dad, please. Shh, don't. We've not spoken.
So nothing up my sleeves. I have no way of influencing you. So it's your choice of numbers 1, 2, or 3. Which envelope do you like? Is it 1, 2, or 3? So you're holding up number 3. Excellent. Are you sure? 3. It is still 3. Kind of a shame, but okay. So it is 3. Now, can you unfold that piece of paper I've thrown to you? And could you please tell the audience what's written on there? Nothing. It's blank, yes, because I made a mistake. It happens. So I have another piece of paper. So let me just bring that to you.
It didn't go like this in rehearsals.
Here you go. And the program will continue. So, we'll repeat the question. Can you unfold the paper and read what's on the paper?
You have selected envelope number 3.
I have selected envelope number 3. Audio? I'll just speak more loudly. So you've selected envelope number 3. So normally this would have been the first thing I've thrown out. I have no way of influencing it, although now I did, because I had it over here. So how did I do that? Assume that I've thrown the piece of paper out there at the start. I had no way of influencing. You had complete control over what you chose, 1, 2, or 3. Any ideas? Are you telling me I'm lucky? In that case, I'm going to invest. No, I'm not that lucky. So any suggestions? No idea. It's magic. No, it's not. So let's tie this back to options. First of all, I'm always right. This trick always works well if I throw the right piece of paper. I didn't do that properly this time, my apologies. That's interesting. So there, I had a way of solving that. Now, if I suppose that the answer would have been 2, then what would happen then? Then I would actually have it wrong, it seems. But that's not the case. So suppose the answer would have been 2. Then I would have asked my lovely assistant, Chris, so number 2 shows, could you please show the back side of envelope number 1? So there's nothing written on the back of number 1. Can you show number 3, please? The back of number 3. Right. Can you now please show the back of number 2? You have selected envelope number 2. So I do have a solution for that. Now, of course, it could be 2 or 3. I'm not a gambling man, so I want to make sure. So it could be number 1. In that case, Chris, can you please pull out the paper that's in envelope number 3? And it has a big cross. Can you please do the same for envelope number 2? 2.
I can't count. Okay. I got it the wrong
2.
order.
Oh, okay, and now can you now do that for envelope number 1? You have selected envelope number 1. So now, while this is a nice way of doing a magic trick for your friends, there's actually some reasoning of doing this, and that has to do with option theory. So I've proposed a problem with 3 different outcomes, 1, 2, or 3. I have no control over what the answer is, so there's uncertainty there. What I can do is prepare for the uncertainty and prepare for each of these options. And basically, I'm delaying the decision of what my answer is going to be until I actually have more information coming in. Until I have the answer of what you have chosen, I will tell you what I have selected beforehand. Although I did have multiple answers, of course, but I didn't tell you until I had that information. So this is a way of how you can apply option theory to real life and help you gain a better outcome.
Okay. So let me introduce you to the real options model. It's fairly simple, 12 words. First one is options have value. Yeah? So very straightforward. If you've got an option and you don't like it, you don't have to do it. But having the option itself has value in its own right. Options expire. Yeah? So you have an option, but what we tend to find is that as we go through time, either due to time or due to conditions, the options expire. The big difference between financial options and kind of real options is that in financial options, the terms of the expiry is very carefully defined. In real options, in the real world, it's often conditional. You know, your option to speak to me expires at 5 o'clock this afternoon when I leave. In actual fact, it's not quite 5 o'clock. Your option to speak to me expires when I leave, unless you actually have my email address and we can perhaps have a conversation afterwards. And then finally, never commit early unless you know why. Now, the thing about the real options model, number 1 and number 3 about behavior. What it's saying is that these options have value, and don't commit early and destroy options unless you know why. So be very deliberate about why you do it. Now, there is actually value of committing early. Yeah, it can help us to be more efficient. And what the option model does is it helps us understand what are the things that we need to know in order for us to commit early. Yeah? So number 1 and 3 are about informing your behavior, which is to try and avoid commitments if you can. Number 2 is about the fact that options expire. And this is the difference between procrastination, where we just let things happen to us and events unfold, and us taking control and being aware of those options. Now, what we find is that there's a lot of decisions to be made out in the world, and that if we're not careful, the options that we have can become overwhelming. The number of options available to you are overwhelming. There's almost an infinite number. But if we focus on the ones that are about to expire, why are we stressing on things that are going to expire in a couple of weeks' time? Let's just focus on the ones now that are about to expire now. And this is the model. So, options have value. Understand that having options in life has value. Even if you don't use them immediately, having those options does expire. Okay.
So, when we talk about these things, we're looking at when is something a commitment. Because you're committing to a result. Something is a commitment when you're either legally or emotionally tied to a certain outcome. At that point, you feel committed to that particular course of action. That could be, and it depends on your value system. So you feel committed to traffic laws. You might feel committed to having an agreement with a friend. And we'll explore some of these scenarios in the next couple of slides. Now, when looking at this model, at some point, a lot of things become optional. And this is an interesting topic to explore, because it's viewing things in life and choices that you make as either options or commitments makes that you treat things in a different way. You might treat everything optional, but and then again, there is a cost associated with that. So if I would treat any of my agreements with friends as options, I would agree to come and then wouldn't show up. They might accept it once or twice, and at some point they might not accept that anymore. So again, looking at those things, understand when you're going into a commitment, and try to explore the options that are out there for yourself. So we're now going to actually do some room participation, and we need you for that.
Okay, John Hannah. Right, I need 2 team captains. So Roman, you're one team captain. Ellen, you're another team captain. Okay, it's very simple. I want everybody to stand up. Everybody stand up. I'm going to draw a line down the middle of so to Roman in front of you. In front of you.
Sorry.
In front of you means in front of you.
Ah, yes, thank you.
I'm drawing a line here. One side, if you want to be on Roman's team, get to that side. And if you want to be on Ellen's team, to that side. So there's a couple of you who are being sliced in half at the moment. Right, okay. So very simple rule. When you have a red and a green, can you hold up Roman? Ellen, can you show? When you have a red and a green business card in your hand, you can sit down. So the competition is which team, which side is going to sit down first. Yeah, we like competition, don't we? Right. Just to give you kind of a idea, 30 seconds is the record. Yeah, you look like competitive people. So right, 3, 2, 1. Everyone, once you've got a red and a green card, you can sit down. Go. What's our timing?
25 minutes. Chris?
don't know how long we've got left.
20, 25 minutes.
25 minutes left. Is one side sitting down? It's close. I think, oh, there's a few people still standing. Who's the winner? Come on. Has everyone got a green and a red card? I think it was this side. You had a slow start, but I think you were you know what? It's about the finish that matters, isn't it? And they were quick out the gate at the start, but they were slow to finish. Okay, everyone's now got a green and red card, which means that we can start asking your questions. Is that an option or a commitment?
So red means it's a commitment. Green means it's an option. So this is where you as a group get to vote. Jumping down a cliff, is that an option or a commitment?
So let's see, reds. Come on, everyone has to vote. Come on, no hiding. That's a commitment. So, yeah. So what we actually have here is that there's a certain point in time where we've made a commitment. Yeah, after that, it's a commitment. But there's an interesting point over there where the guy's just about to jump, and it's like, oh, it's an option up to that point, and then after a certain point, he's committed. Yeah? Right. Let's try another one. Turning up today. This will be interesting. Front row's going to be like, who's saying option? So, red or green, option or commitment, turning up today.
So I have some reds.
Red.
Some greens, mostly greens.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's make it more interesting. How about for Chris and myself?
So, was this an option for us to turn up, or was it a commitment?
Mostly reds.
Mostly reds, yeah. It might seriously damage our reputations, not that that's particularly good in the first place, if we hadn't turned up. So, yeah, it's kind of a commitment, but, you know, if something really bad happened, it was an option.
So just an example from practice is that the collective of us, so Chris and I, do feel commitment, and we are committed to being here. It has happened in the past that one of us committed to an agreement to speak somewhere, signed us up both, and then found out that he couldn't make it.
So and one of us felt committed to turn up.
So that's another way that we play with this. We look at, so what is the risk associated with, what can we commit to, and by actually having us both registered, we reduce the risk of not showing up due to some other appointment or some major catastrophe. Airline tickets.
Plane tickets, this is an interesting one. Who thinks plane tickets are a commitment and who thinks they're an option? So let's see.
I see mostly greens. A few reds,
yeah.
But mostly greens. Okay.
Yeah. And there's some smart people saying both. And what about to the airline providing the ticket? Is it an option or a commitment? Well, let's see who's flown a lot. Anyone with a green card is obviously a frequent flyer.
Because airliners treat this as optional because they know that a certain percentage will not show up, so they'll overbook a plane anyway. So they'll treat it as an optional. Hopefully it doesn't happen a lot, but you might get bumped for a particular flight. However, they do have most of the airliners have a requirement to transport you still, and then on a next flight, and provide you with some compensation. But just the fact that you have bought that ticket provides you with the right to do something, but not the obligation, and that in itself is an option. Something interesting happens as soon as as the doors close on the airplane. As soon as you're on the airplane and the doors are closed, the legal framework changes, and at that point you're committed to actually taking that airline flight to that destination, unless you're willing to pay severe consequences, which you don't. So at that point, you're really committed. Hotels.
Hotel bookings, options or commitments? Aren't hotels wonderful? We all know that options have value, that they're kind of, you know, an at-the-money option's worth about 11% of the notional. And they give them this for free. And the expiry date on these options is normally up to about 6 p.m. on the day that we're meant to check in. So if ever I think I might be going to a conference or I might be going somewhere, I go and book a hotel room, because then I know I'm going to be in the best place for the event, and then I know that I've got the option to cancel it up till 6 p.m. on the day. We're starting to see some new emerging business models around this option stuff. If you look at Booking.com, they basically charge you to take away, that they kind of pay you to actually take away that option, so you're committing to actually paying for the room in advance. Yeah. So what about a locked door? Is a locked door an option or a commitment? Red or green, please? Let's see some red and green. It's getting tricky now, isn't it? See, context is really important, isn't it? Because when we think of a locked door, we always assume we're on the wrong side of the locked door. Yeah? But in actual fact, if you're on the right side of a locked door, it's an option. You know, we have the option to go outside. But if you're on the other side of it, it's kind of more of a commitment. This thing you've kind of gone through, and it's like, oh my God, I'm now committed to being outside.
So one of our friends has a way of solving that he has trained himself. When he locks his door, he actually uses his keys to pull the door shut, so that he now turned that kind of a commitment of locking yourself out into an option, that he has the option of always getting back in. A concert ticket.
A concert ticket, option or commitment? I'd like to see.
Do you actually have
to
go to a concert?
Everyone, option or commitment going to a concert ticket? Yeah. It's slightly worrying that quite a few of you still think it's an option to go and see Michael Jackson in concert. So quite often things aren't options or commitments. They're nothing.
So that option has expired. Marriage, is that something that's a commitment or an option?
Yeah. People who are looking for a prospective partner may want to pay attention at this time. So come on, option or commitment? Yeah, both. Yes, I like that. As a man who's got divorced last week, finally, yes, it's definitely both. There's an interesting story. When we did the book launch in Holland, where Olav's from, we did this exact question. And everyone in the room went, oh, yes, marriage is a commitment, and put up a red card, apart from one person who put up a green card. And that was Olaf's wife. And she claimed it was a mistake. So children, come on, let's see. Once again, this is a good test for prospective partners. Who thinks children are an option and who thinks they're a commitment?
As soon as you have children, are they a commitment or are they optional?
Yeah. And so what we tend to think of is, they're optional to the point we've got them, and then when we've got them, they're a commitment. I've never called them a commitment, but, because they'd probably go, Dad, what? But they're much more than a commitment, so much more.
So then one of the last examples, when you put something on the web, is that optional, or are you committed to having it posted on the web? Red says it's posted, it's committed to the web. Green is it's optional. You can revert it. So some reds, most reds, some greens. So here, it's absolutely possible that if you put a blog post on the web, you can pull it down again. However, nowadays with technology, these blog posts get aggregated to many different corners of the internet. As soon as it's posted on the web, there's no chance you'll ever get it off the internet again, and it will be found somewhere. So as soon as you post something to the internet, you're committed to having it out there.
So this is a pretty simple model, yeah, and that's deliberate. We tried to keep it really simple. We took all of Black-Scholes, we took all of the financial mathematics, we looked at what could be applied in the real world, and we compressed it down to this. Should be simple, but what's the catch? So the catch is, people don't like uncertainty. And I have to inoculate the room at this moment, because you'll like this, but I once said this next statement in a room with quants. You know those people, little propellers who do maths for a living? How many of you are in the room of quants? Because I'm kind of a quant. Yeah. I once said this is a rational decision framework, and they all went mad, right? So I have to say that because then you're all going, no, I'm not mad. This is a rational decision framework. Ideally, you would want to be right. Yeah? If you're not right, you would rather be uncertain. And then, if not uncertain, the final thing you would rather be is wrong. But if you actually look at people's behavior, what you find is that their true preference is they'd rather be right, and if they're not going to be right, they'd rather be wrong. Because people hate to be uncertain. Have you observed this? They're like, yeah, we've got to make a decision now. Why? Because I've got to know. I've got to commit to a course of action. Why? Because I don't like the uncertainty. There's too much that can possibly go on. Yeah? And so this is one of the biggest challenges that we've faced. And so what we advise when dealing with real options is rather than give people total uncertainty, we give them bounded uncertainty. Yeah? So we reduce the uncertainty so that it's at a manageable level. So rather than, oh, let's make a decision later as to whether we go for A or B, we say, well, that expires at the point where A is no longer an option, so we will make a decision when. Yeah? So we give people the conditions upon which to make the decision between option A and option B, rather than say, we'll decide later. Yeah? And this helps people. Okay.
So, looking back at jumping down a cliff, of course, the act itself, jumping down a cliff, that's a choice that you can make, whether or not you want to jump or not. Looking at it from an options perspective, when are you committed? Well, as soon as you're in that second frame, you're more or less committed to getting down there. One way of looking at this is actually how reversible is a commitment that we're making. Because if you make a commitment reversible, it's actually becoming an option. So, taking that into context of jumping down, what you actually need is a rope. And not just having a rope and then jumping down, but actually you need to prepare this. You need to make sure that you tie the rope at the top, then throw it down, so you actually have a way of climbing out of a cliff in the nature. So this becomes important from a time scale perspective. So if you're jumping down a cliff and there's no way that you can return, if there's plenty of food around, you have no other obligations, you can survive, you can stay there for a month, and that will not be much of concern. Maybe you might consider this a holiday. However, if during the moment that you're jumping down, you break your foot, you're actually in a bit of trouble. Then you want to make sure that you have a way of getting out there fast, preferably within a day, because there's no way that you can gather either drink or food. Now, things could get worse if you see a volcano and you can actually predict when the hot lava will reach your spot. At that point, you get really concerned about making sure you get out there fast enough. You don't want to be trapped in some kind of a corner. If you see a lion, even if he's lying in that kind of shape, you still want to make sure you run as fast as you can and make sure that you run faster than the slowest people in your group so you can survive.
So, Olav, I'd like to point out something here. See this? This is one of the scariest things that you could see on the savannah, isn't it? Why is that? Because they're strong and they're fast. Yeah? If you think about the fastest animal on the planet, the cheetah, what is it? It's a cat. What do cats do all the while? They sleep. They're actually brilliant at sleeping. If you're trying to run an organization where the most important thing is at the appropriate time, you can run faster than anyone else, do you think it's good that everyone's jogging all the while and not getting any rest and is not prepared to run fast? Yeah? So the option to run fast often means that you're going to practice running fast, but you're actually going to prepare for running fast as well. And the best way to prepare for running a marathon is not to run another couple of marathons just before.
So, in the survival context, it means that if the time to recover, that means the time to reverse that thing that you committed to, is bigger than the time that you can survive, you'll actually die. So this is where you need to make sure that you have the options available, which means you need more options. Now, why is this relevant? How likely is it that you'll jump down a 12-foot cliff and break your foot? Not very likely, especially not with a volcano and a line. We get that. However, if we put this into an IT context, this becomes really interesting.
So, yeah, so what does this look like in IT? So, as I say, it's not about jumping off a cliff in Africa, because, you know, most of us don't do that in our daily work lives. But perhaps we do something similar. And so, if we look at this month thing, my background is, as I mentioned, IT in trading floors. A month would be, well, if we're perhaps doing a finance system where we do month-end finance, we could perhaps put something live, and then if we broke it, we knew we'd got a month to recover. Yeah? So the way that we would approach fixing it would be very different to other ways. However, if we're in the situation where we've got a day, so if you're perhaps working with a very illiquid market and you need to do your risk management on a daily basis rather than real time, you've perhaps got a day to fix it. And when you've got a day, you've often got time to get people to come and look, try and work out what the problem is, and fix the problem and move forward. However, we get into some markets where you've perhaps got an hour. You've got an hour to fix the situation. Now it's getting tricky because, you know, some of these processes that we run can take quite a while, so we might have to have, as we do a change, we may have to have a hot backup ready to roll back to the safe place. It gets even scarier. Because what if you've only got a minute? Well, now perhaps our whole strategy to the way that we introduce changes. So if you look at Facebook and Google, they don't think of this idea of rolling something out to 100% of the people in one go. They'll test it, they'll pilot it, they'll look at 1%. If that works, they'll increase that to, say, 5% and then 10%, and they'll do a gradual rollout so that they can roll back. Or if it fails, the consequences aren't too bad. Because it's all about rollback. Now, you guys are in finance, so just a quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of Knight Capital? Who's heard of Knight Capital?
A few hands.
A few hands, great. So Knight Capital were a brokerage firm, something like that, low latency stuff in America. And they did a software upgrade. And the way they did software upgrades was manually. And they had 8 servers. And they did a new software upgrade because it was going to be good and groovy stuff that they were doing. They did the upgrade, and it was done manually, and they manually upgraded to 7 of the 8 services. They then noticed that something was going slightly squiffy. Squiffy is an English word for, oh my God, something's gone really badly. In 45 minutes, so they'd noticed something gone wrong. Within 45 minutes, they'd lost $1 billion, they'd gone bankrupt, and caused huge turmoil across world exchanges. If you're interested, Knight Capital, read up. And it's this whole idea, can you recover? And the most important thing from Knight Capital was that they weren't prepared. They weren't thinking in terms of, okay, if we jump off this cliff, how do we get back? But even more important is they weren't looking for lions. Yeah? They didn't think, actually, we need to monitor stuff. So if we want to get really good at this stuff before we make these big commitments, we want to perhaps think about what monitoring do we need to have in place, and how do we roll back to a place of safety. So once again, we come to, if the time to recover is greater than the time you can survive, you die, which means you need more options, and don't waste time, monitor the conditions.
So the whole thing is that this is not about probability. This is not about taking a chance and thinking, oh, this has a 90% or 95% way of succeeding. This is really about making sure that you survive. Same as tying that back to the magic trick. I want to be right every time. The only way I can do that if I monitor all the conditions and if I make sure that I have everything prepared for each of the possible outcomes. It's really about survival. It's about getting the best solution regardless of what other contexts and other conditions are out there.
So something that's possibly familiar to you guys, liquidity. Who's familiar with the concept of liquidity in markets? Yeah, so liquidity in markets is quite simple if you think about it. In a market, you have offers, so you have bids and you have offers. But what are those bids and offers? Yeah, so here's a question. A bid and an offer, is it an option or a commitment? We've got the green cards and the red cards. Bids and offers on financial markets, are they options or commitments? Yeah? Okay, so they're commitments. So on the buy side, or the kind of the person taking those bids and offers from the market, it's kind of an option, providing they can execute fast enough, because otherwise it's not an option. And on the opposite side, it's a commitment, unless they can move fast enough so that they can withdraw the bid and offer before they're hit. So if the market moves fast, they can withdraw the offer. So once again, it's this whole time to recover, time to survive. And what we find is that a market is liquid if there are lots of options. Yeah? And that when we start looking at it like this, what we start to think is, well, actually, presence of options, people are putting options into the market. What they're doing is they're reducing the volatility in the market. Yeah? And so what we find is that there's an inverse correlation between liquidity and volatility. And the problem with volatility, of course, is we can't affect it directly. But we can affect liquidity. Yeah? So that's one of those horrible things for you guys to think about.
So this applies into IT context. So we've taken this theory and see how does that include staffing for projects. So make a graph of your team and essential capacities. So in this case, we've got 5 capacities that we need, and we've got 4 people in our team. And we grade them on a scale from 0 to 3 on how capable they are in that. So for the top one, it's green, the feeds development. We've got 3 people who are experts in this and who can teach other people. So there's not a lot of risk there. We have plenty of options there. However, if we look at the test, deploy, or make T department, we only have 1 or 0 people who can do that. So there we're at serious risk. Now, for those of you in IT, there's always those handful of people who are critical resources. Generally, it's either an architect or it's a database administrator. That single person will then will limit your options of moving fast. It will limit the possibility that you have to respond because they are always overloaded. So in order to move fast as an organization, you need more options on each of these critical capacities and capabilities.
Okay.
So what you need is actually still need the T-shaped people. You want to have the Swiss Army knife, where somebody is actually an expert in one piece, but they're very broad in all the other areas, so that you can cover if somebody else is not available or is overloaded. That way, it provides you with more options. You have more way of responding to the market, more ways of responding with conditions that you've not foreseen so far.
So there's an interesting behavior that we see regarding options, and there's kind of a urban myth. The 2 guys sitting at a train station in India, and they're waiting for the train, and they're sitting there, they're eating their lunch, and the train come in, and it looks like this. And they look out the window at this train, and they go, "Why don't we finish our lunch and catch the next train?" Yeah. And so they finish their lunch and they go to the station master and they go, "Right, okay, we saw that train's gone. When's the next train?" And the station master says, "In 3 weeks." And this is often the case. If you don't have many options, everyone just chucks everything on. So from an IT perspective, the projects that we do, everyone wants everything because it's going to be another 3 weeks before they can get on the train. And so they ask for a whole load of things they don't really need, but they might possibly need them. So they throw everything on the train rather than just having the things that they need. And the opposite example is, and because you know this 3 week thing, you have to manage your time very carefully. In London, where I come from in London, we have the London Underground, and it's great because you don't have to think about that. You turn up, and if you're lucky, a train turns up once every minute. every minute there's a train, so we don't have to worry about that. And in fact, if there are busy trains like this, I just sit and wait. And I think, you know what, I might have to wait 3 or 4 trains before I get a seat, but I'm prepared to wait because I know there's going to be lots of them. There's lots of options. So it has a big impact on our behavior.
So just 2 more examples from friends of ours. Christine, a good friend of Chris and mine, learned about real options and applied it to her own life. One critical day was coming up for her. It was her wedding day, and she shared that one of the important things for her was having the right shoe for the event. Now, you can go out there, find a good shoe.
Let me just try. I don't know. This is an American woman. Apparently, for American women, shoes are important. Just to give you context.
So it needs to fit with the dress, it needs to fit with the occasion, it needs to fit her shoes, well, it needs to fit her mood. However, some of these things you only find out on the day itself. So you want to postpone the decision, you want to postpone the commitment to which shoes to wear until it's actually you have all the information that you need, which is at the wedding day itself. So what she did, by applying real option theory, is she ordered online 6 pairs of shoes. And she didn't decide which pair to use until it was actually her wedding day. And at that point, the next day, she returned the other 5 pairs, and she committed to that pair of shoes for that wedding day. So this is just a way of how that change of perception, how that new filter of looking at things like options and commitments changes your behavior and leads you to a better result.
So most of the work that we've done in the real option space has been helping people develop IT projects, which is kind of just an asset class for investment. But I always know when someone's kind of got it, when they go outside of that space, when they kind of apply the area in an area that's unfamiliar. And so another classic example, a friend of mine rang up and he said, my wife and I were trying to decide on the school for our son. And we had a very clear preference. There was a state school that was free, that was excellent, and that was our number 1 choice. The number 2 choice was a private school that was very expensive, but it was very good. And the worst choice, the 3rd choice, was a state school that was not very good, had very poor scores. And so we obviously wanted there. The only problem was we didn't find out whether he'd get into the state school until after the date for actually paying the deposit for the private school. And he said, so what we did, because we knew this, and because of the real options thinking, we didn't want to make a commitment in terms of which school. What we did was we actually paid the deposit. We didn't intend to send him to the private school, but we paid the deposit for him to go to the private school. And then 2 months later, it turned out he didn't get into the good state school. And all of a sudden, the private school was our preferred choice. Very simple example, but what my friend said was, what was really useful about real options wasn't the clever thinking. It was the language that he could use to talk to his wife in a very rational and calm way about something that was very emotive to them so that they could think through what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and what you want to prevent is premature optimization. So this is about making some investment. They had paid that tuition fee or that registration fee for the private school. Well, that's a cost that they would make, and able to allow them to have that option. By optimizing on costs too soon, you actually commit to a certain path. By actually keeping that broader, you allow yourself for better outcomes. So, wrapping this up, we looked at option theory, created a model that is simple. It's just 3 lines, 12 words. Options have value, options expire. Never commit early unless you know why. Applying these can lead to many insights, many new insights. What we hope to have given you is a new way of looking at the world, new way of looking at the other presentations that you'll see today, and see how they will provide you with options. Look at things of whether something now is a commitment or an option. Do you actually need, you focus on the timing, so focus on when is something crossing over from a commitment to an option, and is there a way of making that commitment reversible? And what you want to do is have bounded uncertainty. Instead of making it completely uncertain what's going to happen, you can actually limit it, monitor the conditions very well, and make sure that you have a rope if you need to climb back up.
You now have the option to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, it will become a commitment.
We have no questions. Excellent. Thank you all very much.
We'd have time for 1 or 2 questions if there are really any very urgent ones. Otherwise, I'm sure people can catch you in the break later on and ask questions if anything comes up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And promise me never to consider to become marriage counselors after what you said here.